And yet the people that are our customers are saying over and over again, make it stop, make it go away. It's just too hard. In fact, you know what they do when they have a major data breach right now in companies? And this guy said, I'm really worried about my company losing my data. I'm a driver. I'm afraid they're going to lose data that they put online because we use third-party service providers. You know what happens when people actually breach your data? Well, the Ponemon Institute studies that. There's 5 things they do. One of them is they use more encryption. I'm in charge of an encryption company and lucky to have the legacy of PGP behind me, but I'll tell you something. Encryption is not a solution by itself. And anybody who tells you that is lying to you. They can make it sound as good as they want. We've been doing it for 20 years, and it's not the sole remedy. They do content classification. Let's find out what data is important, and let's put that stuff where it belongs. And by the way, let's not put it out on the web. Let's not make it where it can be attacked. So they're doing DLP, data classification. They're adding more access controls. Anybody see the announcement? Some of the major cloud suppliers in the last 2 weeks have come out and said, we're ready to go to the cloud. And what we've done is we've put more locks in place. We've put more trained people in place. We've put better authentication in place. Doesn't that sound like 1965, the mainframe? And then they say something that one of the guys that from the founder of the CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, said to me this morning. He said, you know, Dunk, they tell you to trust them. Oh, okay, it reminds me of that scene in Animal House where the guy gave his car over to the guys and said what happened to it. And he said, hey, you trusted us. That's what happens when you get an answer out of an SLA and somebody says, you lost all my customers' data, now they're suing me. And they said, hey, you shouldn't have trusted us. Not a solution. We're going to have to take this head on if we're going to make the cloud come to the fruition and give us the TCO we want. If you look at the cloud, it's really interesting because people think of it in some definitions as a big ubiquitous mass. When in reality, it's a whole bunch of other kinds of clouds. And they all mesh together. And the interesting piece of this is that I look at things like the custom application platforms and intranet platforms and all the other technologies that go into this, and I say, so what's different about the cloud versus those first 3 eras? Because some people are arguing that they're just extensions, and other people saying it's a brand new paradigm. Max Hopper would say it's different except for 2 things, because he was a Sarbanes-Oxley expert in his second career after retiring from American Airlines. There's 2 big drivers that didn't exist nearly as much then as they do now. One is compliance, and the unholy alliance of compliance with regulations. And all of you know that compliance and regulations do not, and I repeat, do not equal security. Ask anybody who's passed a PCI audit and then had their records breached. And the growing threats are definitively different than the people had for the first 3 eras. This all started roughly 8 years ago, when people started to say, we're going to have to defend people who've had their data breached. And data breach, as I talked about, is still a major problem and has a major cost attached to it. But this part of the cloud, the complexity of the environment, the compliancy, regulation, and threat makes your job as IT security practitioners that much more difficult. In fact, I would say near impossible. I don't know any other group of people in the world that if you were a professional athlete, call yourself a professional baseball player in America, and you hit 999 out of 1,000, you're a failure. I don't know any other profession in the world that you guys have that kind of pressure on you. Baseball players, for those of you who are not from the U.S., if you hit 3 out of 10, they give you $100 million and call you a hero. Fundamentally, much tougher job in the data security business these days. I mentioned the Cloud Security Alliance. The Cloud Security Alliance came together, 6,500 people as a grassroots movement, to publish a series of documents to say, what are the best practices? So if you're going to go to the cloud, what can you do? Here's one place you can go to get great information, because the document was put together by 200 volunteers and some of the best minds in the industry, designed to help you if you're going to take the plunge in the cloud, you're going to put your data out there. This is what you can go look at to do. It says that the first thing you're going to run to that's different isn't a technology set of issues, it's a set of legal issues. So you thought you had trouble with your own attorneys in-house or your outside counsel. Fundamentally, when you go to the cloud, the way data is treated legally is very different when it's off-premise. So the legal issues are going to be paramount as you move forward. Regulatory environment, we talked about it. Some of these are well known. You can add the European laws. You can add what they're doing in Asia right now. They're looking at national breach laws in the EU. All of these things are going to continue to come and continue to bother you. And we had a bunch of people talking about this. PCI, all of this regulatory things, they are going to continue to press on the ability to move data freely and securely in the cloud. Because you're going to have to answer to these if you breach. But the one I find most interesting, and the one we don't talk a lot about, is jurisdictional data. And that is where your cloud supplier takes your information and actually moves it to a third party or offshore where the laws maybe aren't as friendly, where maybe the governments aren't as friendly, or maybe the laws governing intellectual property aren't as friendly. It's that third one, jurisdictional grouping, that you should spend a lot of time on, because it's one that you have no control over once you've given the data over to the cloud. What are the other differences? There's one key technical difference that has really come up. Bruce Schneier said he believes it's the one that if we don't solve, we're really going to have problems in the cloud in the future. It's the idea of federated trust. You know, trust defined? Yeah, great marketing slogan for PGP. VeriSign's been using it for years. A number of people talk about, who do you trust on the internet? Well, fundamentally, federating trust in this environment is going to be the biggest issue. How do people who are sharing infrastructure and sharing storage and sharing processing ability, how do those people come together and agree on which set of rules and laws they're going to be governed by? Federating that trust and making sure trusted providers deal with trusted providers is the number one issue. You've got three new external issues that I think are key. First one is one that people don't talk a lot about, and that's organized crime. Well, criminal gangs, as just been proven, are the guys that targeted the 12 largest data breaches that we've happened in a row. Same group of people. Estimated over $100 million was their take. And they ran pretty free in the world for about 3.5 years. So, and they were just sentenced. Finally caught the kingpin, who unfortunately also was an inside informant to the government. Back to trusted providers, trusted sources. Fundamentally, who do you trust out there if you're going to put your data in the cloud? These guys attacked weak systems, systems that weren't patched, used a variety of things that went through that. But they were prompted by crime and profit. It's a big issue. If you look at the second area, and it's an area that I think is very, very interesting that we don't talk about, it's insider threat. Every time there's been a downturn in the economy in the last 30 years, correlative studies have shown that data is stolen. Last fall, there was a study that said most people that are laid off do something or can or would do something maliciously to their employers, including stealing information, stealing IP, or shutting down key systems. Huge insider threat. But the one I think that we've seen that brought the most press, and I think is a crossroad moment for most of us in the room that either are suppliers or practitioners, is this idea of nation states and the bad actors. Who are they? What do they do? And who do they work in consort with? Because this takes it from, are we going to lose our jobs? Are we going to get fined? Are we going to have some regulatory problems? To, are we going to lose our intellectual property and see it pop up someplace that could put us out of business? And even worse than that, are we going to see our customers individually targeted? And even worse than that, are we going to see things that we make or supply going to be lost, ultimately, in the areas of the Department of Defense and the war on cyber terror? Folks, this isn't FUD. This just happened. It was on the front page of every newspaper. Secretary of State Clinton got up and talked about it publicly. We need to do something about this. Those are areas that the people in the areas of computing never had to deal with, never had to work on. But you do. And it's a completely different set of expectations on you as practitioners. And then the last one you're going to have to consider is trusted providers. You know, who do you trust? Who are you going to buy from? Who are the people that you're going to use in the cloud if you're going to put your data there? And what promises do they make you? Trust me, given the last three that I talked about, you might really want to think about that, because geolocation and jurisdiction is going to be a big reason why or why not you pick those providers. And the vendors. I'm a vendor. We're not doing a good enough job for you. In fact, in some cases in the cloud, we failed you. We've hyped it, we've told you to lower your cost, and then